Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is a screencast-o-matic presentation and recording for the part of the lesson that has us looking at the roles of the First Ladies, First Families, and Vice Presidents of the United States. Before we get started, please let me encourage you to open up to today's lesson, scroll down the correct section, and get ready to fill in the content and answer the key concept questions that coincide with the presentation. Please remember that you can replay any part of this presentation for detail, clarity, or repetition later on. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about the roles of the First Lady first. On your slide right now, you can see the former First Ladies of the United States of America, with the exception of Melania Trump. Now, the First Lady is usually the wife of the President of the United States, although sometimes throughout history that role has changed. The First Lady essentially acts as the hostess of the White House and organizes official ceremonies and state functions. Additionally, the First Lady often sets the fashion trends in America during that time, based off of what they wear, and sometimes fashion companies might work with First Ladies for a multitude of different occasions. Now, recent First Ladies have devoted their time and efforts as First Ladies to promote causes like environmental protection, healthcare, literacy, and childhood obesity. Sometimes you might see specific organizations and foundations being headed by the First Ladies of the United States. Now, in terms of the Vice President here, the role for the Vice President needs more explanation and I think clarity, for the following few reasons. Most people tend to write off the Vice President as having not too much power. However, constitutionally speaking, the Constitution says that the Vice President presides over the Senate and may only vote to break a tie. The Vice President may also preside over and certify the electoral vote count in elections. And the Vice President, of course, becomes President if the President dies or becomes unable to serve. And we're going to talk about extenuating circumstances about this later on. Now, additionally, the Vice President also serves and takes on assigned roles and duties given by the President. For example, if you remember, former Vice President Pence took on Operation Warp Speed as designated and allocated by President Trump, his boss. Sometimes Vice Presidents can also, of course, take on other roles too, on a need-to-know basis based off of what the country is going through at the time. Now, in terms of salary and benefits here, the Vice President cannot be fired by the President directly, although Vice Presidents of moments past have resigned the office. There are no term limits for Vice Presidents, so they can continue to serve. And additionally, the Vice President is paid $230,000 a year and has around $20,000 a year expense account, which they might use, of course, for recreation and travel. The Vice President also receives housing, staff assistance, and transportation. Their job in many ways is of great importance, and sometimes the Vice President might just fill in for roles that the President just simply can't make due to their busy schedule. Now let's go ahead and talk about the prospect of next in line presidential succession. The reason why the vice presidential role matters is because the framers of the Constitution left the details of presidential succession to Congress. The Presidential Succession Act of 1947 changed the line of succession after the vice president to then Speaker of the House, followed by the President pro tempore, followed by the cabinet members, starting with the first department created. And in a sense, the line of succession goes down and down from that point on. Did you know that during the President's State of the Union address, one person is labeled as the designated survivor and actually goes to a different location just in case something were to happen to the location of where the President is delivering his or her address? Now, there have been several amendments along our nation's history that have changed the way that vice presidents serve, especially when we look at the line of succession. For example, the 25th Amendment, ratified in 1967, stipulated and further clarified that presidential succession with vice presidential vacancy and presidential inability to serve can, of course, occur. If the president dies or is removed, the vice president becomes president of the United States. And then, of course, the next in line might follow. And, of course, for more information on that, we're going to learn more about that in the next corresponding lesson. Now, if there's a vice president vacancy, a new vice president is to be appointed by the president. This was first used in 1973 by Nixon, who selected Gerald Ford to replace Spiro Agnew, who you're going to find out later on had issues with tax evasion and fraud. Congress must approve the appointment by a majority vote of both houses as well. So in a sense, this is like a Supreme Court justice appointment because they do need the approval of both of those chambers to essentially give the nod for this nomination. If the president is unable to perform the powers and duties of his office due to health or other reasons, then the vice president will become acting president until the president is able to resume his position accordingly. Now, this was first used in 1985 when Ronald Reagan sent a letter to Congress handing power to George H.W. Bush while he underwent surgery to remove cancerous polyps from his colon. And of course, this was the right thing to do for the time because the surgery itself was not only pretty important, but so too was the recovery time for President Reagan. Now, there's been a few moments in times, like I said, when the presidential line of succession has been used. For example, John Tyler became the 10th president after the death of William Henry Harrison. Millard Fillmore, the 13th president of the United States, came to be after the death of Zachary Taylor. Andrew Johnson, the 17th president of the United States, came to that office after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Chester Alan Arthur, the 21st president of the United States, came to be after the assassination of James Garfield. Theodore Roosevelt, the 25th president of the United States, came to be president after the assassination of William McKinley. Calvin Coolidge, the 30th president of the United States, came to be the president after the untimely death of his predecessor, Warren G. Harding, in the 1920s. Harry S. Truman, the 33rd president of the United States, came to be president after the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. If you recall, this happened towards the end of World War II. Lyndon B. Johnson became the 36th president after the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy in the 1960s. Gerald R. Ford became the 40th president after the resignation of Richard Nixon, and that happened in the 1970s after the Watergate scandal. So as you guys can see, there's much to know about the vice president, and I would argue that their role today becomes more important when you analyze all the things that the executive branch does do. Good luck with completing the rest of the lesson. And if you need to, replay any part of this presentation for detail and clarity. Thank you very much for tuning in.